Good evening, Energy Rogue Nation. Welcome back to another weather discussion. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This is now part 2 of our double feature tonight, where in part 1 we talked about the United States short to medium term CDD, HDD outlook along with the revisiting of our winter forecast. The same format will be taking place tonight, except in this particular video we're going to be focused on Europe, both Western and Eastern Europe. And so I want to start first with this. And by the way, before we dive in, I hope you all did enjoy part 1 of the North American version of this video. If you have any feedback, questions, be sure to post that in the Discord Weather Rogue within the Energy Rogue Discord server. And of course, as you're watching this video tonight, if there's anything additional you'd like for me to cover, especially for my European friends that I may be glossing over, feel free to message me as well. I'm happy to go even more granular than what we're going to talk about tonight. But I want to start first with this, and I don't know if the European folks here are familiar with this website. It's climate.copernicus.eu. Quite frankly, I don't know much about this source. I actually stumbled upon it today, but from what I gathered, it is an extension of the European model suite. So sometimes you'll hear me refer to our discussions the ECMWF. This is a European-derived weather model, and the folks that create this weather model seems to have outsourced some of their content over to Copernicus, but that's as far as I know. So for folks that may be more familiar with Copernicus, feel free to provide me some insight on that, because otherwise I'm going to look into it myself, and that's very interesting. There's a lot of interesting things with European weather models versus American weather models. I've even had this discussion with both Brian and Bill, I know, off the record, but for example, the European weather model I just mentioned, the ECMWF, they tend to be, it's open source to access it, but they tend to put things behind like copyright, and they're pretty strict about giving acknowledgement to their model, so to speak. Whereas models like the GFS and the NAM and some of the more, I guess you could say, American-derived weather models, it's way more lax with their open source. I'm a little bit of a diatribe there, but I find as a meteorologist the European weather models and the way that they do things is a lot more strict in terms of usage versus the American ones. And of course, it makes sense. You want to acknowledge where you're providing or getting the information from, but just kind of a little interesting factoid there. Anyhow, we are looking on the Copernicus website with an EU domain, of course. This is the Nino 3 sea surface temperature anomaly. Now, I think what would be a little bit more familiar to folks is this is really talking about El Nino versus La Nina, right? So anytime you see these anomaly values and say the negatives, we're really talking about La Nina. And of course, you can probably read between the lines, but if we were talking more about a El Nino event, then we're looking for those values to be in the positives, right? And if you have any questions about that, let me know. I'm happy to go even deeper than that, but just for the sake of conversation, that's really how we delineate between both El Nino and La Nina. In this case, what we're looking at is we're not just trying to decipher and predict La Nina versus El Nino, but we're also looking at it from a wide range of different weather models. For example, all these red lines are denoting a different solution within this blend, or not blend, but an ensemble, if you will, right? And so this helps us forecast really the confidence interval of whether or not we will see an El Nino or a La Nina event. In this case, if we follow the general spread, and as we've seen announced by the NOAA Climate Prediction Center, we are anticipating a weak La Nina event for this winter season. And currently, the probability of La Nina setting in around December to February is between about 60 to 70%. So it's a relatively high probability. We're even seeing that on our current observations tonight, that La Nina is slowly starting to set in. And this dot here, by the way, is really our observed sea surface temperature anomaly. And so as you can see, we were sitting at about 1 right in the summer. That was a El Nino that we were coming out of. And now you can see that that's starting to creep below 0. So we're sort of in this neutral pattern, but we are expecting to continue that downward trajectory, as you see here denoted by that blue line, and thus be in a La Nina by the time we get to the winter season. So what implications does El Nino and La Nina have for European weather? If you follow the United States, El Nino and La Nina is the big hot button topic. Everybody talks about that when we look ahead to things like winter, the summer, and really in all respect, the spring and the fall. So you're probably wondering, well, Brendan, what does that have to do with Europe, though? Because for Europe, some may argue we're more concerned about the NAO, which is the North Atlantic Oscillation, which in a way is a variant to El Nino, La Nina, similar effect, right? But you would think that we'd be concerned about that, which we are, but let me actually explain why we still need to look at El Nino, La Nina, which in a way contradicts what I've said before, but follow me here for a second. When we think about El Nino and La Nina, let's just talk about La Nina in this case. La Nina jet pattern in the United States typically looks like this. So follow my black line, we get this troughing that takes place in the four corner states, and it sort of ejects northeast. Okay, so we see winds come out of the northwest, or our jet flow come out of the northwest here in the Northwest Pacific, dives down across the four corner states, and then eventually ejects towards the northeast. That would imply that we then see above normal temperatures for the southern United States, and even to some degree the northeast, while our colder temperatures would be in places like the Midwest, the upper Midwest, and parts of New England. As that jet flow moves off towards the north and east, right, so if we draw this back out again, we could take that all the way across into what is north of Bermuda, and then the question arises, okay, so then what does that happen, or what does that mean for Europe? That's when we talk about the NAO. So the North Atlantic Oscillation is when we start to say, okay, are we going to have more of this area of high pressure that goes like that and then dives south across the UK and the Eastern Europe, bringing colder air? Or do we see the opposite? We see more of a troughing pattern and then a ridge, right? So let me actually draw that back out again. In case of a negative NAO, we're looking more at something like this. So those two distinctions is pretty critical to what we're really forecasting for here in Europe, right? And so what I want to do first is, now that we have that in the back of our mind, I want us to run through two different models, the same ones that we looked at in part 1 of the video series tonight. First one's going to be the GFS, and what you're seeing here in the blues and the reds is your temperature anomaly. And this is, of course, in terms of Celsius. So for all my European friends that love working in Celsius as much as I do, this is for you, right? So let's take a look at this going forward in time. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to deviate a bit. I'm going to call an audible in real time. Rather than looking at the 2 meter temperature, let's take a look at the jet stream map, because this is really what I want to hone in on. So currently what we have across the United States is a trough, or an area of low pressure that's digging across the four corner states. That is leading to an area of high pressure out towards the northeast and the Midwest, keeping those areas warm. But meanwhile, if we look towards, say, the northern Atlantic, we see some troughing here and then ridging. So as a result of that, whenever we see a negative NAO in this case, or troughing near the western Atlantic or the northern Atlantic, that then leads to warmer air across much of Western Europe. So that's why this is important. Even if we're seeing a La Nina or a weak La Nina in that jet cutting across the northeast, if we're going to be seeing a negative NAO here, well, then that's going to lead to warmer air downstream in places like the UK, France, Germany, Portugal. It's going to be seeing some of that warmer air. So let's play this forward in time. Keep that in mind. Watch these colors here, because when you think about it, the blue is corresponding to area of low pressure, and these orange colors are corresponding to areas of high pressure. So if we go forward in time, especially as we get towards, say, the latter half of this week, you continue to see, yet again, this jet stream cut across the southern United States, and then we get troughing out towards what is the, call it the northern Atlantic, so to speak, or really just off the coast of New England. And as a result of that, you get upper level ridging out towards Western Europe, right? And that leads to those warmer temperatures, exactly what we were talking about. This would be this weekend, and as we continue onward, you see an even stronger amplification of high pressure. We could be talking about well above normal temperatures for much of England, by the way, as we head towards the middle of next week. And this just tends to continue up until at least right around, say, that second week or third week of November, right? Once we get this Greenland block to set up, then it's a different situation, right? Rather than troughing near Greenland, instead we're getting an area of high pressure near Greenland, which helps to dislodge some of that colder air further south into places like, again, much of Western Europe. And that continues for quite a while as that Greenland block remains in place for at least a few to several days. So in the immediate short term, and by the way, we can even look at this from the European model as well. You see here that as we head towards, well, this goes out towards the 11th, but as you can sort of see by that Greenland block that eventually begins to set up, right? Then you get some of that blocking to take place. Eventually, once that moves into Greenland, though, is when we would expect to see some of that colder air eventually getting into Western Europe, and as well as Eastern Europe. So what I'm forecasting here in the short term is this. I continue to see on our model suite similar things to the effect of, for the most part, above to even well above normal temperatures for Western Europe, especially in the next week and a half. But what I'm starting to see on the model blend itself is more of a Greenland block pattern setup, to where we would see more of this consistent below normal temperatures. That would take us into the back half of November. Now, one thing I want to preface for my European folks, I am personally not anticipating a full-blown winter here, right? Despite the fact that we're in a weak La Nina, and you would think that'd be the case, what our climate models are showing, and also what our general pattern is showing, is more of the same that we see in the United States taking place in Western Europe. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, for example. If we were to, say, look at our monthly map, right? So just as a reminder, here's Europe, and we're looking at the 500 millibar jet, which is our jet stream. If we go forward in time here, you see, once again, we get this troughing to take place across the northern United States, but then look what happens. It doesn't really show much blocking as we head into January 25. This is a pretty mild jet pattern regime for Western, even Eastern Europe. And, there is some possibility that we see, in this case by February, some cold air advection making its way, especially into England. But the problem that I have is because it's going to deeply depend on how much our NAO oscillates, and if we get a Greenland block pattern to set up, quite frankly, I still think that for the most part, for Europe in particular, I am not anticipating much. I'm trying to think how I want to word this. I would say for Western Europe as we head into January and February, and especially even December, I am not expecting a consistent below normal pattern because of the frequent oscillating that I expect with the NAO. I don't expect long periods of negative NAO or positive NAO. In other words, I don't anticipate consistent cold for Western Europe. As a matter of fact, I think it's going to be variable, but once the season is all said and done, I anticipate that these temperatures are going to be above normal for much of Europe. So we can actually summarize that here by taking a look at the CFS, but looking more at those temperature anomalies. I mean, look at this, guys. Same cannot be said about the United States, right? We get that troughing to take place, that cold air to be displaced down towards the northern half of the United States. But look what happens with Europe, right? This is really implying that for that NAO pattern we keep referring to, yeah, we have that La Nina jet pattern, but rather than having, rather than having a area of high pressure near Greenland, instead, it looks more like troughing, right? More like this, and then a ridge. And that would imply more mild temperatures, more above normal temperatures for Europe. And that's exactly what the CFS is showing as we head through January, February, and March. Same can be said about CAN-SIPS. It's another one of our climate models that we use. And as you can see, right, more of the same. We're not anticipating much in the way of frequent cold air snaps. If you're talking more about far eastern reaches of Europe and even getting in towards Russia, yeah, that's a whole different story. But what the climate models are showing us is despite La Nina taking full reign, we're anticipating more of a negative NAO, which would imply warmer air as opposed to a positive NAO. That has significant implications. So I will say this video is rather shorter in retrospect to the North American video. That's not on purpose. I deeply appreciate my European friends here, and I'm happy to do even longer videos dissecting more of what you would like to see. But without saying that there's nothing to talk about, because that would be untrue, the forecast for Western and Eastern Europe looks more the same. I mean, more of this above normal temperature regime, and I can't stress it enough, little to do with La Nina and more to do with the NAO. So I am not very bullish on this winter for Europe in contrast to the United States. I'm really not. As a matter of fact, I think, with the exception of this Greenland block episode that some of the models show for the latter half of November and December, I think once this is all said and done, it's just going to be above normal for most of the season because of everything that we talked about tonight. So I am happy to dissect this further. I know that for folks in the United States that may be not familiar with the NAO, because we really don't talk about it that much, this might be kind of over your head. For the European friends that we have here, NAO might sound more familiar to you in some of the weather discussions you've heard. But of course, La Nina, El Nino, there's always still that teleconnection that exists, and so we are concerned about that. But hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. If you have anything that you would like for me to cover with Europe moving forward, please let me know. Also, my other question to you is on the WX Rogue page. Let me actually go ahead and pull that up here because this is something else that I just remembered. On WX Rogue, we currently have, clearly United States products. Would you guys be interested in seeing something similar to, say, population-weighted degree days for, say, the United Kingdom, England, or France, Germany? Would this be something that would be of value to you if we put a product like that together similar to the United States, except for Europe? Let me know in the weather Discord chat if that's something that does interest you. I mentioned in the first video that I am also putting together the rest of those historicals. So if you guys have been keeping track here, I don't know what's going to open up on Discord. Let's see if it opens up. I have so many different Discord servers I'm a part of. I don't know which ones I'm in and which ones I'm not. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and have it load. All right. So if we go over to Energy Rogue and then Weather Rogue, I posted earlier this week this product, right? So this is our heating degree day historicals for New England, and we were looking at these sort of 10-year increments and putting together 10 and 30-year sort of climate historicals for some of these EIA regions. I am going to be putting together the rest of these for that 10-year increment this weekend, as well as the 30-year. Please give me your feedback on that. Let me know if that's something that interests you. Again, these are historicals, so we're not talking necessarily about climate normals. These are looking at pretty much breaking down year by year within 10 to 30-year intervals and showing you what the peaks are. So I know Cash, shout out to you. You asked about this. As a matter of fact, you and I have been talking about that back and forth, a product similar to that. We also are going to be working on a separate product to this, because this is relatively intuitive to put together, but also going more granular than that and creating a database that will keep track of CDD for pretty much the cities within these regions and go more granular than even what this product does. So case in point, if you have any feedback on any of this, feel free to let me know. I'll be working on that throughout the weekend. I really do hope you guys enjoyed this video tonight. And as I've said already, if there is something that you guys want me to cover that I may not have covered extensively in this video, let me know and I'm happy to do that. If you have any questions about European weather and the intricacies of it, I'm happy to answer that too. Always here to help. But other than that, this concludes part 2 of our double feature tonight. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching these videos, and we hope to see you on the next one. We will be back with another weather discussion as we head into next week and next Tuesday and Thursday. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of your night. Talk soon.